President Trump is challenging this Biden-era immigration initiative, welcoming migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela amid these stunning allegations of widespread fraud. The Trump administration is now gearing up for a legal showdown, slamming the ruling here. All right. Bill?
And we got some Fox News team coverage kicking off right now with Chief Legal Editor Carrie Urbahn standing by with analysis.
But first, let's get to our senior White House correspondent, Jackie Heinrich. She's in position there at the White House for us. So, Jackie, what action can we expect from this administration?
Well, obviously an appeal is coming, Sandra, but the press secretary just said something pretty significant. Even though these 500,000 or so migrants entered the country through what was at the time deemed a legal program, the Trump administration views them as illegal immigrants, saying that the Biden administration stretched the law to get them here in the first place. Here's what Caroline Levitt said.
Many of these paroled individuals were then given temporary protective status, which the intention of that TPS was only supposed to be used in times of war or storm or destruction in the home countries of these migrants. It was completely abused. These migrants came here for economic reasons, and they illegally entered our country, and the president is not going to tolerate that. And so we will continue to focus on deporting as many individuals as we can.
So the judge's order as it stands would appear to require that each of these 500,000 migrants should get individual hearings. The White House saying that it will fight this in court. Former President Biden created the CHNV Mass Humanitarian Parole Program through his executive powers. Now President Trump is trying to use his own executive authority to undo it and to revoke their status. One official calling the judge blocking his ability to do that lawless tyranny. A DHS official is telling Fox Biden's reckless parole programs unleashed over 530,000 poorly vetted aliens into America, fueling crime and stealing jobs, forcing our agents in the field to ignore rampant fraud. While this ruling delays justice and undermines the integrity of our immigration system, Secretary Noem will use every legal option at the department's disposal to end this chaos, prioritizing the safety of Americans. Now, in the meantime, Congress is trying to stop judges from being able to issue these nationwide injunctions at all. Listen here.
Well, the judge is wrong. He or she obviously doesn't know a law book from a J. Crew catalog. I believe this judge issued a national injunction. In my judgment, those are illegal. There's no basis in statutory law for that. There's no basis in Supreme Court precedent for that.
The CHNV Humanitarian Parole Program started bringing migrants here from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela in about 2023. It was paused after widespread fraud was uncovered and some high-profile crimes were discovered among its recipients, guys.
Okay. Jackie Heinrich live at the White House for us. Jackie, thank you.
Thanks.
And we want to dive into this topic a little bit more. For more on this, we want to bring in Fox News Chief Legal Editor Carrie Urbahn. Carrie, I know you're going to have some thoughts on this, so help us make sense of this, right? President Biden, literally at just the stroke of a pen with his executive power, creates this program in winter 2023, allows more than 500,000 migrants from around the world to fly into the country. President Trump wins the election. He comes into office and using that exact same executive authority wants to pull that legal status that Biden gave them. A judge is saying, no, you can't do that. How? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think President Trump should be able to. To your point, you have an executive order creating this program. You have an executive order ending the program. And in their filing, the Department of Justice is arguing that the Secretary of Homeland Security has wide discretion here. And if you take a look at the relevant law, it talks about when the secretary has determined that the purpose of the program has been fulfilled, it's over. Now, the lawyers for the plaintiffs, some of the people who are here, are arguing that that means that they are entitled to a case-by-case review of their status. But the law is pretty murky, I think, on that front. And what is clear, though, is how much discretion the DHS secretary has, which is evident by the fact that Secretary Mayorkas created this thing in the first place.
All right, so this is Jonathan Turley from earlier on Fox News, Carrie, on the timing problem for this administration when it comes to removing the CHNV paroles. Listen.
If you allow the 2 years to run out and these people haven't applied for legal status and they stay here, they go into the usual formal process for deportation. And we all know that a lot of people don't even get trial dates for 8 years. Under the existing program, they can expedite deportation. If they're here after that runs, they're afraid that they're going to go into the usual system, and we've got another 500,000 people that are hard to remove.
Obviously, a big point that the professor is making there, Carrie.
Yeah, and look, this is, I think, the general problem we have in our immigration system, not just with respect to this program, but overall, which is what the Trump administration has been trying to fix. I mean, look, what Secretary Mayorkas under President Biden did here was basically create a new visa program without congressional authority. You know, this is the problem you run into when you start doing all kinds of things by EO that say wouldn't otherwise be lawful. And so what happens now to the people who are here, who relied on a program that the government, our government, told them was a legal way to enter the country? Well, interestingly, DOJ is arguing that as part of the application process, these people who applied were told at the very beginning that the program could be terminated at any time for any reason, which I think is fairly compelling as far as being on notice. But to Professor Turley's point, I think this speaks to a larger problem, which is, I think, in part why we're seeing the Trump administration go so aggressively to fix the problem on many fronts using different laws and different methods.
And Carrie, this program had all sorts of issues. It was temporarily paused after there was widespread fraud found within it by DHS. Some examples: there were serial sponsors, thousands of them sponsoring more than 20 people each. Some of the most used phone numbers belonged to dead people. Some of the same addresses were used hundreds of times. A Haitian man who was brought in via the program was arrested for raping a child in Massachusetts. Another Haitian man was arrested for molesting a 10-year-old boy in Massachusetts. The vetting clearly wasn't very good when these folks were coming in, but now this judge is saying if you want to take their legal status away, you have to individually vet and go case by case with 530,000 people. Your thoughts?
And that's the question I think that will ultimately go to the Supreme Court. Because, again, if you look at the law, it says that the secretary has discretion to end the program when it's been in her, in her mind, and here Kristi Noem's, fulfilled. And, the plaintiff's lawyers are arguing and say, well, no, if you look at the law in the aggregate, there seems to be a case for a case-by-case review because there was a case-by-case determination made at the outset for their bringing them into the country in the first place. But, Bill, on that note of exploitation and abuse of the program, we saw that in a number of ways, even beyond what you're saying. You saw people here in this country who were illegally charging people thousands of dollars to be their so-called financial sponsors when they weren't being sponsors. They were just making money off of it themselves. There were also people in this country who were looking at it as a way to traffic the people they were bringing in, to get, incredibly cheap labor, to violate all kinds of labor laws here in order to do what they wanted to. So to your point, this program was riddled with problems to begin with. It was done seemingly unlawfully, and now the Trump administration is attempting to terminate it. And I do think that fundamental question of case-by-case review will probably ultimately make its way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and that program was one of the most controversial pillars of President Biden's immigration policy. The White House has said they're going to appeal it. They're going to fight it in court. So we will see where it goes from here. Carrie Bond, great to see you. Thanks for your insight.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.